Welcome back to the channel. Today is the day where we're going to work on the beta again. I was in a bit of a rush for the first oil change and I just decided to not film it. But now I've done another 6-7 hours on the bike. So we're gonna do the second oil change. And we are also going to install behind this plate right here, there is actually the oil stuff, right? The oil gears, the transmission, etc. And one of those gears, the oil pump gear specifically, is plastic. So one of the upgrades that a lot of these people do right off the bat is replace that with a metal gear so you don't need to keep opening up that piece and servicing every 100 hours. So that's the goal for today. Install steel oil pump gear and change the oil as a whole. So we're gonna bust out the manual and start working on this thing. Like and subscribe, and let's get to work. First thing in the manual, we have to warm this thing up. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, we'll let that run for a couple minutes. Get the temperature up to 100 degrees. Start working on it. We're going to take off our skid plate. And bolt 3. Just start going to town. Sorry, I'm coming down with a little bit of cold after Moab. Not good. We'll wipe that off. Just make sure don't get any crud. That, I believe, is the engine oil, and then we will deal with the transmission oil second. First, I'm going to clean this thing off right here, which is the bottom oil strainer. Alright, so just cleaned off that bolt a little bit. Gonna hit it with the compressed air one more time, and then we'll be good to reinstall. Okay. Reinstall that piece. Now we will undo the transmission oil. There we go. Clean off this bolt. This one's got a magnetic tip, so a little bit of ferrous material, but nothing too crazy. Together, and I got some kitty litter that I can use to clean up all this stuff. Set this aside for a second. Reinstall once that's really fully drained. Oh God, making a mess like usual. Pretty much got most of it. We're gonna be taking this whole case off right here, so we're gonna get all of it. Don't you worry. Okay, so now we gotta torque the bottom bolts here to, well, the oil drain bolt gets torqued to 15 Newton meters according to the manual. So let's take care of that. So we have our digital torque meter set to 15 Newton meters. So we are in Titan mode. We'll check. And we'll set the next one, which is the gearbox drain, to 20 Newton meters. All right, now let's go to the other side of the bike and replace that oil filter. We're on the other side of the bike now. We're gonna take off this oil filter housing. I should wipe that off first. And we will clean that off a little bit more once we get it off, but. Oops. Well, we're gonna use some kitty litter. It's all good. Get this top bolt. Move the bike away from my little oil spill. Back over here. And now I'm gonna start working on draining the coolant. So, I have a 2,000 milliliter clean bucket I'm going to use to reuse this coolant. I also have some extra just in case. And then we're going to crack this bottom bolt. You're going to need a bigger wrench here. scraping has started. And while holding that, I'm going to undo this radiator cap to get the rest out. There we go. Alright, we got it all out, looks like. I'm gonna put this bolt back in. Woo. And then we're gonna torque this back down to 10 Newton meters. We are done with the plug. So let's do that right now. And then we'll just throw the radiator cap back on for good measure for now. Last step, we're gonna throw this up on the stand. That way we don't have to worry about this thing wobbling around anymore. Alright, next up we're going to remove the brake pedal return spring and the brake pedal nut and bolt, which is this spring right here and then this right here, so that we can move this whole thing out of position. Ribbon's doing it from the bottom. That's easy. Brought over all my metric open-ended wrenches, but alright, next up is this. So that is a 8mm Allen wrench. And on the back here, what is that? Either a 13 or a 14. And it is a 14. So we got a 14mm bolt on the back here and an 8mm Allen. Let's see. It's gonna be the easiest way on this. Okay, good. Okay. And then the cotter pin on the back here. All right, after some persuasion, I think I got this cotter pin in a position where I can wrestle it out. Almost. Woo, okay, this out. Finally take off this nut and bolt, and we can take the brake out. Let's clean up the exterior of this case to make sure no dirt gets in, and then we should be good to go. Okay, now we're ready to take off this whole plate here. And so it's all the top or outer bolts. So this one, and this one all stay in place. The rest of them come off. These are length specific, so I'm going to leave them all in place. The only difficult one is this top left, which we have to use an open-ended wrench on because the frame's in the way. Let's see if we can pop this off. I think that's it. And there is the system. Very pretty. You're gonna have to take a razor blade, do the little last bit right here of that gasket. And I have a new gasket, so that should be pretty easy. All right, let's pause, clean up a little bit, and get going. Okay, so over here, I got the steel oil gear kit. Let's get to work on the next steps here. So we have the clutch cover bolts off. Move the 6 clutch bolts, washer, springs, and pressure plate. Let's just make sure that we're following the instructions here. Okay, take all these bolts out. Don't let that fall off. Whoa, almost dropped it. So, on this, You can see where the bolts went in. I'm gonna remember to put bolts in these little areas. And now we will just grab all the clutches as an assembly. Like so. We will place that on our napkin over here and our pins out. Six pins. And our throwout bearing. Okay, next we're gonna take out this safety nut right here. So I'm gonna use my little hammer and screwdriver and try and knock this out. Now we can use this thing. Let's line these up. Push that on. And we're going to bust out the impact wrench on this one. That is now off. Now we can take this off and remove this entire assembly. And there is pieces on the back, so just keep that in mind. So next up, we are going to take off the two rings, or the two gears. So I've got a pair of snap ring pliers. I will take off this one. There's one snap ring. There's a washer on the outside. So there's the old one. We will put that on the napkin as well. Put on this gear, just that. Put back on this washer. And then we're going to put the snap ring back on. And we will make sure that that is all seated. Cool. So that would be bad if that popped off. Now we got to deal with this second one. Now it is time to take off that bottom gear. So I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver. And I'm just going to pry this thing off. Make sure you're careful so that this doesn't go flying. And then we will take this gear off. A little bit of shimmying. So the gear's got this spacer on the back, or this pin, locking pin. I just rotated it sideways so that it wouldn't come flying out. Now we can take our replacement gear and then just feed it on. Some wiggling. And then we can push the C-clip back on. I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Cleaned off. And we're just going to pop. There we go. So we are back in business there. Steel oil gear has been installed. Let's get this back together because we've got another trip to Moab coming up. We'll button it up and call it a day. That means I'm going to have to take off the residue here. Be too difficult, except it's going to make a mess. I just cleaned up this port right here, had a little bit of gasket material on it, so clean that up. And now let's begin the reinstall process. So first I need to put basket. All right, that goes on here to center everything up. That would have been bad. Okay, now for this piece, it has the washer on the back. Boom. Spin this so that that locks into place there. And we will throw a whole bunch of Loctite on this, as well as my clutch install tool. Make sure we can get that in place. Oop. All right, that's fine. Cool. We'll install our locking washer, some blue Loctite on the interior of this nut, and this gets installed to 120 Newton meters, so that's a lot. We'll get this thing started with the impact wrench, and then we'll throw it on the torque wrench. Okay, and now 120 Newton meters. All right, 120 Newton meters of torque. And now we can bend over those locking tabs, and then we can throw the clutch discs back on. Now I can put these parts back in. Now we're going to try and throw on these clutch discs and plates all together. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. All right, we'll try and do it one by one. That's probably the easiest way to do this. One, two, three, four. We got our throwout bearing. Got the outer clutch plate. Have this. And finally, all of these bolts. We'll get a couple started, and we'll put blue Loctite on that too, just to hold everything in place. And then those get torqued to 10 Newton meters. Put this in first gear. All right, now it's time to put on the gasket. So we will do that. There's a couple dowel pins down here, one up here. Line everything up. Voila. It should be pretty straightforward. The only difficult part is the coolant pump. Might have spun a little bit. Let's see, not quite lined up. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. Some long bolts in, hold that in place, then we'll tighten everything up. We can now fill this up with fluids and make sure everything's not leaking. Okay, I'm going to fill this back up with coolant. Get everything out of the way. Okay, now it's time to put some engine oil in it. I'm gonna put in 750 milliliters of Motul 7100. Motul 7100 going in the drain right now. Let that drain in. Now for the trans oil Expert 10W40. or the manual. Finish off this, and because the whole thing was open, we're gonna have to put in 800 milliliters. Now let's throw that in the other side. That is the last bit. Cover back on. Make sure that's nice and tight. And we'll do the same thing on the oil side. Fire it up. Make sure that we're cooking with gas. Power, prime. Think we're good. Well, that's it for this one. Hopefully you learned something. We got the oil gear done. That's a good thing. Like and subscribe. And yeah, let's see you on the next one. Peace.